Right, everyone, welcome to the show. We have a very interesting episode today. We have a very, very special guest on the show, and I'm really looking forward to actually speaking to him, and I hope you guys are really going to enjoy this. So, our guest today is none other than Dominick Montiglio, ex Gambino associate soldier. Um, you will definitely know him and have heard stories of his past and the DeMeo crew and Nino Gaggi and the Gambino family. So yeah, we'll pass it over to Dominick. Dominick, hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay, Dominick, I'm just gonna let's start with your upbringing and how life started for you.
Well, my childhood was very messed up, I guess you could say, because my uncles made sure that my father left. So I was basically brought up by Nino and his way of thought. And I was very athletic. I played football, baseball, and had a pretty charmed life that way. But then I decided to join the army, and which Nino was totally against, because he said you die for your family, not the government, you know. And I just said, well, there's a war on. I want to see what it's like. And I did, you know. And when I came home, I was brought back to the music industry, which I had a big part in. And I got married and I moved to Berkeley, California, where at the time we called it Berkeley. You know, because there was like riots every day out there. And I hung out at there, and then I got in with Nino, you know, because he said, you're married now, what are you going to do with your life? And I said, you know, I don't know.
So roll back at like when you were growing up, who was Nino to you? He was your uncle, but
He was my mother's youngest brother.
Right.
And he had sway with the family, you know, with our family. And, you know, I didn't know who he was or at the time, you know, what he was into. But then he made his way up into the Gambino family and he became a capo. Well, it was a process of meeting people. And, you know, I met Carlo and he took me under his wing pretty soon. And, you know, I figured out with all the publicity and this and that, and I got to know a lot of people as a kid. And then when I joined, I met a lot of other people that I didn't have privy to in the beginning. And I started doing work for them, you know.
So your uncle Nino, was he, could you tell us what he was like, what his personality was like?
Well, that's a hard thing to say because he had a very different personality when he was out in the field doing work for the Gambinos. And when he was home, he was a different person. But he basically had sway over me. Like whatever he wanted, I'd do, you know.
would you say he was kind of like a father figure to you?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have any memories of your actual real father, or were you too young?
Very little,
Okay.
because I was kind of young when he left. I was
Right.
about 3 years old, 4 years old.
Right. Okay. And so at that time, Albert Anastasia is in charge of the Gambino family.
Yeah. Yeah, he was in charge at the time.
And do you have any recollections of Albert Anastasia? Did you ever meet him?
I never met him, you know, but I knew about him. Well, I was basically told to stay in the house and not to go out, not to go to school, not to do anything out of the ordinary. I stayed home, and then one day Nino just came to me and said, "Okay, you could go out again."
Did you know why you weren't allowed out, or did you
Well, I
have
had a pretty good idea when I heard that, Albert was put to rest, so to speak.
Right. Okay. And at that time, was Nino afraid of what was going to happen? Was he, when Carlo Gambino took over the family? Was he worried that he might be in danger?
I think all the Gambinos were in that thrall, and he was very close with Paul Castellano. So I don't think he was really that upset, because number one, nobody liked Albert. Nobody liked him because he was a maniac.
So, what's your recollection of Carlo Gambino? You met him, or?
Yeah, I met Carlo a bunch of times. To me, he was always like a grandfather figure. He was very nice to me, anyway.
Yeah.
And then eventually he took over the family, because I think he had a big part in Anastasia's demise.
Right.
Because he was the underboss at the time.
Yeah.
And took over the family, and that was the end of that, because he made the family a major figure. Everybody made money when Carlo was the boss.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So, when did you first meet Paul Castellano?
Well, I knew Paulie from when I was a kid, but meeting him as a kid and then meeting him as a godfather was quite different.
What was Paul Castellano like? Did you have a good relationship with him? Did you?
Yeah, I had a very good relationship with him. And I'd bring him envelopes of cash once a week from
Right.
Nino and Roy DeMayo's thing.
Sure. Okay.
And I'd meet him at the meat market. And then he'd take me to lunch. And, I was very close with him.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So in your teenage years, could you explain what was it like in your teenage years? Were you involved in any crime at that point, or were you pretty much clean?
I was into music and sports.
Okay.
You know,
And what did in terms of the music, what did Nino think about that? Was he happy about that, or was
no,
he right?
you know, he didn't mind the sports as much as the music because he said everybody in the music industry was into drugs and women and blah blah blah. You know, the same old bullshit. You know, but he couldn't stop me. Our group made a record, and once we made the record, it was at the Delta, and it became a life. You know, I mean, it was my life. You know,
When you were a teenager, was there any resentment towards Nino? Did you feel that there was tension there, or were you okay?
but we had our moments. Let's put it that way,
Right, right,
where we just didn't agree on certain things.
okay.
And then once I got into the life, I understood a lot about what we used to do and how it is now. You know, I'm not saying now, I'm saying when it happened.
When did you make the decision that you wanted to go to Vietnam? Why did you feel that you needed to go there?
Huh? That's a good question because I really wanted to see what a war was. And I had no, you know, feelings about the government or, you know, what Vietnam was all about. I had no idea what we were over there fighting for, you know.
Right. So you, in a way, the war intrigued you. You were interested in finding out what it was all about, or
Yeah.
was that right? And when you got to Vietnam, when you saw what was happening, actually, first let me ask you, what were your first impressions of Vietnam? You landed in Vietnam. What was going through your mind when you were there?
That this shit's for real, you know. I was with special forces, so we had our own way of thinking about it. And it gradually became something that I was enthralled with, you know, night ambushes and recons, and, you know, I enjoyed it, you know. You know, I had never seen a gun before, you know, and with all the training that we went through, you know, guns became part of my life.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, how many years did you actually spend in Vietnam?
16 months.
How did you feel? Did you feel like you wanted to stay there, or did you feel like you wanted to come back?
Well, at the time, I felt like I wanted to stay there, but the Army had different plans for me. Well, the Army made me a military policeman, and they stationed me in Brooklyn at Fort Hamilton. So I rented an apartment, and I had a pretty good life. I met my wife, and
you're in New York. Things are going okay. When do you start getting drawn into the mob life? When did that start happening?
Well, it was just a matter of timing because I could see what was going on with the family. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do. And that's one of the reasons I got out of the military, was to go see what that life was about.
Right.
Which was a major mistake on my part.
Was it the same reasons that you went to Vietnam that you joined kind of the mob? Was it out of intrigue, or you wanted to find out what it was all about?
That's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I had no idea really what I was getting into until they sent me on missions.
Sure.
You know, that's one thing you didn't say no to, because when they wanted something done, it got done. You know.
So what were the first things that, I'm assuming that Nino took you under his wing and sent you on jobs and errands to do?
Yeah. Well, the first job was blowing a guy up in his car. And that's when I realized this is for real. You know, this ain't fake. You know, these people are playing for real.
Did you know who the person that you were targeting was, or did they not tell you who?
Well, I went to school with him, and what had happened was him and Nino got into it over my aunt, and he broke Nino's nose 12 years earlier. So Nino waited 12 years to get even, and you know, blew him up in his car, and he didn't die. He got blown up into a movie theater, and he fled New York, and then he came back, and that was his demise, because that's when Nino and Roy and me, you know, shot him. You know, because Roy was a maniac. You know, there was no if or when with Roy. Roy killed you rather than look at you.
When you were doing these little jobs for Nino, how did you feel? Did you feel any remorse about what you were doing and the victims, or how did you process that?
Well, I feel more guilty about it today than I did then.
Right.
You know, then it was just you were doing work for the family. You know, when they told you to do something, it had to get done.
Right. Okay. And so now kind of Roy DeMeo is on the scene. Can you tell us, when was the first time that you met Roy, and what were your first impressions of Roy?
Well, the first time I met him was through Nino, because he was part of Nino's crew. And my first impressions were, this guy's a maniac. You know, he's a fucking stone cold killer. Because that's what he enjoyed more than anything, was killing somebody, you know.
Did he do something that made you think when you first met him?
Yeah, he killed his kid. Kid was about 18, 19. And he said something about Roy, and Roy got wind of it. And he told the kid to get in his car and drive. And then he came back and he said, "Oh, you won't see him no more." You know, and I said, "Well, he killed his kid for that." You know, and that made me realize this guy's a maniac. you know. And then it just went on because he just killed so many people, you know.
And Roy worked directly for Nino? Did he work under Nino, or was he?
Yeah, yeah.
So Roy kind of creates this crew, and they're based in the Gemini Lounge, which is a bar in Brooklyn. Is that correct?
Yeah, but there was an apartment behind the bar that we used to hang at. And that's where most of the murders were done, was in that apartment. You know, I remember one time I went in there and there was 2 bodies hanging in the shower. And I said, who are those guys? And he said, he gave me the names and I didn't recognize them. And he said, don't worry, you're not staying for dinner.
Wow.
Because that's what the DeMayo crew used to do. They used to kill you, hang you in the shower until you bled out. And then they'd hack the body into pieces. And they had a connection with Anthony's cousin, who was a collector, garbage collector. And they'd call him and put these plastic bags in the dumpster. And he'd come by and pick them up and then bring them to the Fountain Avenue dump and buried them there. And you'd never find them. That's why they had a lot of trouble at the hearings, was to actually come to how many people these guys killed. And Walter Mack, the prosecutor, was up to 200. And he said, you know, we got to stop here because this will go on forever. You know, so they tried them for less than 200.
So, when you said there was 200 victims, were these mob guys? Were they associates, connected guys, or were they just?
They were everybody. All you had to do was, you know, I mean, Chris went down to Miami and used Roy's name to buy cocaine, and then the Cubans came to New York to deliver, and they killed all of them and stole the cocaine.
So this is Chris Rosenberg, who was part of Roy DeMayo's crew.
Yeah.
And so Chris went down to Miami to do a drug deal, and he basically ripped off the dealers. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, they came to New York to deliver, and they didn't plan on anything but delivering the cocaine. And they didn't think that they were all going to die, which they did.
And Chris single-handedly killed them, or did he?
No, Anthony and Joey and Chris.
Right. Okay.
They all did it together, and Chris got shot in the hand.
Wow. Okay. So what happened after that then?
What happened was Roy got paranoid, thinking that the Cubans would, you know, and I told him, because I was close with the Cubans, and I told him, I said, look, they just want this thing to end, but they're not going to end it until the guy that was responsible is gone. And they're not going to believe me by saying he's gone. They want it to be headline news. So Roy decided to kill Chris, which they did, and then put him in a car and machine gunned him. And it made headline news, which I brought to the Cubans and said, this is the guy, blah, 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 you know. But Roy, in his paranoia, just kept it up. They killed a 19-year-old vacuum cleaner salesman. thinking that he was a Cuban hitman. And it turned out to where he was an Italian kid working his way through college, you know.
He was basically a door-to-door salesman.
Yeah.
And he knocked on Roy's door, and Roy thought he was a hitman.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. You know.
wow.
And they chased him right across Long Island, shooting at him all the way, and then they finally killed him. You know.
So that was Roy and his cousin?
His cousin.
Dracula?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roy Gielmo.
Yeah. When this was going on, what was Nino's thoughts? Because obviously Nino wasn't involved in this.
Well, it was Nino and Paul, because Paulie was really upset about that. But in a way, he needed Roy's crew because that's who was doing the work. You know, if they needed somebody whacked, that's who they'd call.
Right.
To do the job. And they never failed.
So basically that was Paulie's kind of protection in a way.
Yeah.
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 Okay. And also the DeMeo crew, they were good earners as well, right? They were
good ones.
They were good earners.
Yeah.
They were earning a lot of money for Paul and Nino.
Yeah. Those envelopes got thicker and thicker every week.
Right.
That I brought to Paul.
Paul lived in Staten Island in a big house called the White House.
Yeah.
And
I was there many times.
can you tell us what was it like going in there? Who was there? You know, did you know who the people were? I mean, obviously you knew Paul, but did you know the other Gambino soldiers and maid guys that were around Paulie?
Yeah, but Paul didn't appreciate too many people coming to that house. There was couriers that would bring him the cash, but they had to be very close to the family, you know.
So who were the close guys around Paul Castellano? Who would be his closest person that you would always see when you went up to
Well, Tommy Bellotti, the guy that got killed with Paul.
Yeah.
He was always with him. But Paul he wasn't a very, he didn't have many friends, let's put it that way, you know, because he had one idea about the family and people like Gaggi had another idea. And Gaggi knew, because they were dealing heroin, his crew. He knew that him and his crew were going to get killed if Paul found out about it, because that was a no-no. You know, you couldn't do that. And that made Gaggi make the move on Paulie before Paulie could make the move on Gaggi.
Sure. Okay.
Was the tapes, because they had so many tapes of what was going on in the Gaggi crew that Paul wanted to hear them, and he never did get a chance to hear them.
So, rolling back kind of 7-8 years prior to that, when Carlo Gambino passed away, this is, I would say, what, 1976?
76.
76, right. What happened directly after that? Because obviously you've got the Gotti faction, the Manhattan faction, led by Agnello Della Croce, and then you've got the Brooklyn faction, which is Paul Castellano. And could you explain what happened after Carlo passed away?
Well, he handed the torch to Paulie, which the Gotti crew thought that Della Croce should have gotten that. So they were very annoyed at that. But Gaggi didn't have the power at that time, to get the okay to kill a boss. It was actually my setting up the meeting, because it was between the Castellanos and the Westies, an Irish gang out of Manhattan. And we had the meeting at Tommaso's restaurant in Brooklyn. And it was basically where we took the Westies under our wing. But Paulie had certain rules, because the Westies were one of those crews that would kill you right in Nino Gaggi.
So this is Jimmy Coonan and Micky Featherstone.
Yeah, well, Micky and me were pretty close, because he was an ex-Green Beret. And he was at the meeting with, I guess, one or two other Westies, which Jimmy was part of. And right after that, Coonan decided that he wanted to be Italian instead of Irish, and he bought a Mercedes and dressed in $1,000 suits, which gave him and Micky how would you say it? Micky was more toward the Irish than he was the Italians. And he said, that Jimmy was more Italian than Irish now. But they had a hit put out on Spillane, Mickey Spillane, which Roy did. Because once he got numbered, the Westies took over all his action. And he was the boss of the Irish mob for a long time. And Roy did that one. But it didn't take much. All you had to do was tell Roy, this guy's got to get whacked. And he would go do it,
So rolling back to that meeting between Castellano and the Westies, what led up to that meeting that they had? Why were they meeting?
Well, they killed a loan shark, which was with us, called Ruby Stein. And he had a lot of loan shark business. And the Westies tried to take that over. And Paul just didn't go for it. And that's when he put the Westies under his own wing of the family.
So there was a black book, wasn't there? There was a black book that Ruby Stein had with all these loan shark customers.
With all his customers, And that was basically what the meeting was about. Because Paulie was just telling the Westies, look, you got to get permission before you do these things, because that was unheard of to do something like that,
So you knew the Westies quite well? You knew Micky Featherstone?
Yeah, I know Micky.
Because Micky was a Vietnam guy, right? He went to Vietnam as well?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, when we had the meeting, Micky brought a hand grenade with him, just in case it didn't go well, he'd blow everybody up.
Because I heard in that meeting, I think that they had Westies in apartments nearby, and they were all armed, just in case something happened.
Yeah, but they were such drug freaks that whole idea of, because they were supposed to hear from Jimmy or Micky to get the okay not to go to Tommaso's. And they were all so screwed up on drugs that they didn't care whether they got the call or not. So they never showed. Nino finally got the okay from Paul to whack, to whack Roy. So they invited him to a garage for a meeting, and that was the end of it.
What happened that made Castellano want to whack Roy? What was the issues that led up to that?
Well, they killed a girl named Sherry Golden who had nothing to do with any of the mob business. She was just a girlfriend of somebody that they killed. And they killed him at the Gemini Lounge in the apartment. And he had her with him. But she was in the car. She never went in. And they whacked him, and then they went out and whacked her. And Paul got real upset about that. Number one, she was a civilian. Number two, she was Jewish. Number three, she was beautiful. And number four, she was 19 years old, and they killed her, just for the sport.
Wow. So, aside from that, which is obviously horrific, was it also problems with investigations, because the FBI were investigating Roy at that point as well?
And that was another thing with Paul, because he figured if Roy got arrested, he'd rat. And he knew too much about too many killings for that to happen.
What did Nino tell you about Roy? Did he like Roy? Did he not like him? What was his relationship?
Well, he liked the money that Roy was bringing in. That's all I could say about that. As far as liking him, how do you like somebody and then put 7 bullets into his head? But that's the deal. Once you get the order to do that, that's it. You got to carry it out. Nothing. They never found out, what I was doing, because other than collecting Nino's loans, I had very little to do with the family and their orders at that time. I was like a ghost.
Did you feel like you wanted to become a made member of the mob, or did you you did?
Yeah. And a lot of people that I felt were irresponsible got made before me. And Nino's attitude was always, what do you need them for? You got me.
Who were those members? Who were those people that you didn't think that were?
I can't remember names. Well, I didn't like him because he was an Al Capone wannabe. The way he dressed and the way he talked, and I didn't like him.
What about the rest of the Manhattan faction? Did you meet Agnello Della Croce? Did you?
Yeah, I know it.
What were your impressions of him?
I liked him because he was a real tough guy.
A lot of people say that he was a very, very scary individual.
Yeah, all you had to do was look into his eyes and you could tell that.
Yeah. Did you ever meet Sammy the Bull Gravano?
Oh, I grew up with Sammy.
Oh, okay. Tell us about Sammy.
There's not much I could say that he hasn't said. Me and him always got along. Well, number one, that he was a killer. But number two, it was like we all were. But Sammy was very, he made a lot of money. And, it's hard for me to say anything bad about Sammy. Because me and him, like I said, he never did nothing to me. I never did nothing to him.
During your time in the mob, are there any other memorable characters that you remember from your days?
Oh yeah.
Could you tell us who they were?
Well, there's certain names I won't mention because I didn't mention them at trial.
Okay.
And I wouldn't put them down today either.
Right.
Right. I don't even know how many of them are still alive or what.
Right. Okay.
That's one thing about the mob. I always hated their elimination problems.
Right. What led up to your arrest? When you finally got caught, what things led up to that?
Well, I had a guy that owed me money. I was living in California then, and I found out that he was loose on the streets, big realtor. And I flew to New York, and I knew that his weakness was women. So I brought a penthouse pet of the year with me, who I was close with, and she set him up. And he was going to pay me my money. And we were at this bar. What was his name? I forget the name of it. But he said that, he'd give me another $5,000 that afternoon. So I met him at the bar. And he took out the envelope and gave me the $5,000, and I was counting it. And I mean, everybody in that restaurant, the waiters, the waitresses, the bartenders, everybody was a Fed. And that's how I got arrested, And what's odd is the guy that arrested me, who put the gun to my head, me and him are still very close. We talk once a week, because we got to know each other real well.
Right.
And he's a character.
Right. And so what's going through your mind then? You're under arrest. They're threatening you with some serious charges. What happens then?
Well, then I went to MCC, the Manhattan Correctional Center, and I found out while I was in there that they had a contract on me. They were going to kill me. And I said, well, where I'm going to be the safest isn't in prison, because they can get you in there just as easy as they can get you on the street. So where would I be safe? And I decided that was the federal government. And that's when I decided to give them the information that I did, and had to go to court, and I testified for I don't know how many days in court. And then they put me in witness protection, which I didn't last, I mean, he moved me and my family to a place that just, we didn't fit.
When you were in court and you had to testify against, your former associates,
Including my uncle.
including Nino, yeah. So what was his reaction to you obviously testifying?
Well, they all wanted to kill me. That was their main thing, which they still do as far as I know.
And what was going through your head when you first saw Nino in the courtroom? What were your feelings?
That's a tough one. It was like I really can't remember the feelings, but I could remember that it was the toughest thing I ever had to do in my life. Those few days were just a horror show, and horrible.
And so Nino went to prison for the rest of his life. He died shortly, not too many years after.
Yeah.
When you look back on Nino, what's your memories of him? Do you resent him for bringing you into that life?
I can't resent him for that because I wanted to do that. So I blame myself more than anybody else for that. But, Micky Featherstone is in the witness protection program now. Sammy, tough guys that I knew, went that way, and I know what they went through.
When you heard of the news that Paul Castellano was gunned down, how did you feel when you heard about that?
Miserable, because I had just had a meeting with the feds in New York on that day, and I had gotten back to wherever I was living, I forget. And I turned on the TV and it was all over television, how he got gunned down and stuff, and it really took me aback, because that's the last thing to expect, is for a boss to get murdered.
Because there were feelings on the street that Paul Castellano was more of a racketeer and the men under him weren't earning like they used to. Would you agree with that, or would you disagree?
Well, I agree with that to a point. Paulie was what you would say he had his fingers in every pot, and then he raised it from where you had to give him 10% to 15%, so he was definitely into money. He wanted the money, and a lot of the guys were saying, look, this guy doesn't do nothing for us. Why we got to give him 15%? And they had an attitude about that. Paulie wasn't real well liked by the family. I never adjusted to it because they didn't give anyone any reason to adjust to it. They move you to a place where you're so out of pocket that, you sit there and you're like a foreigner, because these people are all from the South, and you never knew any of them. And you didn't make friends because of the way you were, supposed to be treated.
Right.
And marshals didn't treat you well, There were a few of them that were real good, but most of them that were in the witness protection program, to them you were just another piece of shit, Not in the program, because they have it where you have to give up your family, you can't talk to anybody that you used to be close with. And, the rules that they have are very strict, and they run your life. You could be here one day, and then all of a sudden they say, well, we got to move you. And it's like, wow. And then you're in another place trying to get acclimated to that area.
Right. Okay.
But they never put you where you could be involved or you could have money that you used to make. That's where Sammy lucked out. They let him keep his money.
Right. So many years later, you got into your painting and your artist work. So that's tell us the story when you met Ross.
I met Rossi at my friend's bar, and we just hit it off for some reason. And we became very close. And he's the one that got me into painting. And then I started selling my paintings for like, $1,500, and I started making a living at it.
Wow.
So I stuck with it.
And so Ross helped you out, and you stayed with Ross, and you made a film with Ross.
Yeah.
Which is all about your life.
Yeah.
From the very start to up to quite recently, covering quite a lot of aspects of your life. How did you feel about that film? Was it painful going through all those old memories and of your childhood in New York? How did that happen?
It happened over a 6-year period. We made one film, then we make another one, then we make another one. And the final one that we made, which is out today, to me was the best one. And for some reason, everybody asks me all the time, how come they never picked up on your show? I said, because nobody ever wanted to. We had one guy that was very well connected with one of the big time shows. And then he told the guy that was basically our mouthpiece to him that he couldn't do it anymore because his best friend killed his uncle. So how could he do this to his best friend? So he had to step out of it. But that was the closest we ever came to actually getting it done.
Right.
Well, back in my time, we had a lot of the old timers, which you don't have today. You got the young running it, which is totally different than, well, you take John Gotti as an example. He could have never did what he did and get away with it in the old days. But got away with it this time. But then he died, you know, and he got life in prison. You know,
Right.
you would have never got away with that in the old days, you know. But today the mob is, to me, just a street gang, you know.
It's been a real great experience actually to talk to you, Dominic, to learn about your life, and for you to take us through, you know, your life in the mob. It's been fantastic, and we really want to, you know, get the viewers to see the Lynchpin of Bensonhurst, because I've seen little bits of it, and it looks like a great film, and a great insight into your life and New York. So thank you very much for joining us on the show, and yeah, I hope the viewers have really enjoyed what you had to say. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you.